Today we're focusing on the early 80s, and we have with us several devotees who will be speaking one at a time on their experiences here in those early days. Usually His Grace Nityananda Prabhu is hosting these weekly programs. He's unable to join us today, so my name is Nritya Kishori Dasi, and I'll be your facilitator today. And we'll start with just offering our obeisances to our spiritual teachers. You can join me if you like. And then we will see a short video of His Holiness Tamal Krishna Goswami talking about those early days, and then we will start with our guest speakers. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Tamal Krishna Goswami Nityananda. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityananda. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shrivadi Pashyati Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Rama. And thank you again for joining us, and we can watch the video now.
Sri Sri Radha Kalachandji ki.
That when we came here personally, say 1979 December it was, 1978 December it was, this was, a community with only two individuals, Divyaganananda and Divya Shakti, and their two little Divyas. And Radha Kalachandji. Radha Kalachandji was there, Jagannath was there, and this couple. And there was this building, which didn't look like this, and there was the first house where Jivananda lives. And that's all that there was. So from that, things have gone quite a distance. There was the Houston Temple also, with a certain number of devotees there. And there was no farm. Now, in the span of, say, 5 years, which have elapsed, quite a change has taken place. We built up very quickly. We had many devotees. At that time, our zone included other parts also, north of here, temples in Chicago, St. Louis, etc. So, with great difficulty actually, this place was expanded. That means that I had this strong feeling that Radha Kalachandji should be properly served, because at that time this place was it was a basketball court. This was actually a basketball court which the devotees had been using for a temple room. There were big lines on the floor still. They were just the same kind of lights you see in a high school gymnasium. They hang down on a I don't know what it was, like a pole with a big lampshade over it. All around it was black around each light. Because I remember Srila Vishnupad sitting here laughing. He visited one day and I was leading a group puja, and he was just laughing because he was looking around and he said that this place is 10 years behind the rest of the movement. This is like 1968, not 1978. And the deities were on a formica altar. It was a piece of formica. The same altar that Prabhupada had installed them on, 6 or 7 years earlier. Nothing had changed. There was no restaurant. There was nothing practically. No properties. So then I had always been the Radha Damodar party leader. All brahmacharis and sannyasis. 150 of them. That has been described in our book, Servant of the Servant. And suddenly we had a big temple to take care of. So I had two feelings very strongly at that time. One was that this deity deserves to be worshipped very wonderfully. And the other was that now coming here, somehow when we came here very quickly, many householders came. So I felt that it wasn't just sannyasis and brahmacharis. Now there are many householders here. So there's a need for some facilities. So what happened, to make it brief and quick, is that I approached Srila Rameshwar Maharaj, who was the BBT managing director here in America, and I said to him that I think we should give Dallas a big loan from the BBT so that we can purchase all the properties around here, because they're very inexpensive now, and this is the time to purchase. And he agreed also, and he gave us a substantial loan at that time. I think it was something like $100,000. This is the time to purchase. And he agreed also, and he gave
Sri Sri Radha Kalachandji ki.
That when we came here personally, and he agreed also, and he gave us a substantial loan at that time. I think it was something like $100,000, something along those lines. And we were able to purchase many, many buildings, which immediately were filled up by household of devotees. Different people came at that time, just like I was preaching in Tennessee, and immediately 4 couples joined us, who are still all here now. Jivananda, Mathuranath, Radhanath, and Rupanuga came with their children. And so many other persons, gradually came, and those who were brahmacharis gradually changed over, many of them. So there was a big householder community. And we started work on this temple also. And at that time, gradually we raised enough money and were able to fix up this place. I'm making it very brief and quick. At the same time, we bought a farm, big farm. So our zone expanded very, very rapidly. And it's come to be now what it is. I think over the last 4 years I can say, I don't know if it's true, but I feel that the devotees in this zone have probably worked. The only devotees I would give credit for working as hard as devotees in this zone are the devotees in New Vrindavan, I suspect. That's my feeling. I could be wrong. I don't know how devotees work everywhere, but I just get that feeling. That's the only place where it's just like once I visited Gitanagari, and I passed with Gurupad some devotees, and they were smiling. And then I felt that the only difference between this place and Dallas is that here people smile, whereas in Dallas nobody has time to smile. They work so hard. And actually, by my visiting Gitanagari at that time, they started to work much, much harder, I think, because they all started to take more seriously going on in Sankirtan. But here I have seen over the last 4 years, or 5 years, that the devotees have worked at an intense amount, pace, and taken a huge responsibility, because there have not been many senior devotees here. In other words, when we joined the movement, it was a small movement. It was a simple movement. The overhead of the biggest community, which I was in charge of, Los Angeles, the overhead was $2,000 a month. It was 65 devotees. $2,000 a month, 65 devotees, believe it or not. That's the way it was. Every day the Sankirtan collection was about $100. $125. Very easy place to manage. All the $2,000, we sent Indranila money out one day and finished. And then we all just, the rest of the time, enjoy. A very sophisticated situation presently here. In other words, we have a situation where when someone newly joins here, you can see it's very complex arrangements. Different ashrams, grihastas, brahmacharis, sannyasis, vanaprasthas. We have a very heavy overhead. Everything has become very much more evolved. So when I see devotees over the last 4 or 5 years who have joined, they've had to take the type of responsibility that none of us took in the early days. I had the heaviest responsibility because I was in charge, but I'd say that the responsibility I had in those days doesn't equal the amount of pressure on a single Sankirtan devotee now. They have a greater pressure than I had taking care of 60 people in a big place like that. That's just one Sankirtan devotee has more pressure on that one devotee. And I think that's the same I can say for practically everyone. The people who work in the treasury office, what they have to go through, the temple president, everyone. I've seen Ghost Bihari dressing all the deities by himself sometimes. You know, it's like unbelievable responsibility and pressure has come. So I have to simply, you know, offer my greatest respects to the devotees for the last 4 to 5 years that they could join a movement when it's at such a position of evolvement and take on such heavy responsibilities. I'm trying to give a perspective of where we are and where we stand. Well, it would be nice to be back in those days, but I would argue that it's not possible. That's not possible, because now everybody is not a brahmachari and a brahmacharini. You see, everybody got married practically, except for a few diehards. Almost everybody got married. And just like this community, when you walk outside here, it looks like a slum dwelling, doesn't it? It is that way. I mean, every time I come back from overseas, I get shocked, because I forget what it's like. And then I see it, and I just realize that there's no way our movement can be successful if it's going to look like this around here. No one can join so long as it looks like this. And it's very hard to want to live here continuously also. Everybody does it because they're surrendered and they love Krishna and Guru, and so they tolerate, but we don't like it.
Sri Sri Radha Kalachandji Ki.
Right, thank you for that beautiful video. And of course, Srila Gurudev already introduced our speakers for today, mentioning the names of the devotees who first came here in those early 80 days. So we were planning to start with His Grace Jivananda Prabhu, but he's not here yet. If he joins us at a later time, we will hear from him at that time. And we will start with His Grace Mathuranath Prabhu. I'll just give a brief introduction, and then we will hear from him. His Grace Mathuranath Prabhu was initiated in 1979 by His Holiness Tamal Krishna Goswami, Srila Gurudev, and then moved to Dallas that same year with 3 other families. He's served as the temple vice president and been a member of the temple council here for over 25 years. He's also a member of the JKJ Academy School Board and helps with maintenance of the different rental properties around the temple here that are owned by the temple. And back in the days, whenever His Holiness Tamal Krishna Goswami would come to Dallas, he would serve him in the evenings. This is all that was written for us here as an introduction, but of course it doesn't do any justice. It doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of the amount of service and the dedication that Mathuranath Prabhu has for his spiritual master, to his community, and to ISKCON in general. But we'll hear from him directly. Thank you, Mathuranath Prabhu, for joining us.
Thank you. So first of all, Panchakapa Tribhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So I was just looking at the questions that Mother Urjeshwari had said that we should maybe concentrate on. So the very first one is how I met Srila Gurudev, the first time I met Srila Gurudev. So I want to give a little background of what led up to that, meeting him. So I used to work for a company called Miro Aluminum Company, and my biggest competitor was Presto Aluminum. And they had a salesman named Jim Champion. And so once we had a show where we had booths and we would display our different items. And so at lunchtime, they would have a buffet, and the buffet was, you would stand in line and go through the buffet. And it just so happens I was standing behind Jim Champion in this line. And so I noticed that he was just getting bread and cheese and tomato, but he wasn't giving any meats on the table, and there were lots of variety of meats. So I asked him, I said, why aren't you getting any of the meats? And he said he was a vegetarian. And so I thought, well, I'd never met a vegetarian before, because back then there wasn't very many. So he started telling me at that time, he told me about Srila Prabhupada, how he had met Srila Prabhupada, and he started telling me about Krishna consciousness. And after that, we became like best friends. And he would come over, when he would come to Nashville, where we lived from Knoxville, then he would always stay at our house. And he and I would just sit there for all day, sometimes just talking about Krishna consciousness and him telling me stories. And so he told me that the goal is to take initiation. So he said there's 11 spiritual masters at that time. And he said they can all take you back to Godhead. He said, but if you want somebody to drag you back to Godhead, then you take initiation from Tamal Krishna Goswami. So right from then on, I just thought, okay, that's who I want to try to, aspire for. So a little later on, Jivananda wanted me to go to the first Rath Yatra in 1976, first Rath Yatra that they had in New York. And I was thinking, no, I can't afford it. It's just, I tried to back out of it. And then I happened to get a letter from my company I worked for at that time, and they sent me a credit card, and it was a flight. So you could just charge flights on it. And they said, you're not spending enough of our money. You need to spend more money. And of course, you never hear a company say that today, but back then, so they sent me this credit card, and I said, okay, so what the heck? I just charged a flight to New York, and I went to the Rath Yatra. And so that night before the Rath Yatra, they had a kirtan, sankirtan, like on Times Square. And so I was walking in this, and I was brand new, but I was walking, with the kirtan. And every time I would look over, because I knew who Srila Gurudev was at that time, somebody, Jivananda, had pointed him out to me. So every time I would look at him, he was staring at me. And so I'd look away and walk a little bit, and I'd look over there, and he'd be still staring at me, So I got really, I think, somehow he penetrated my heart a little bit with that glance. And so the next day I told Jivananda, I said, I got to get out of here. I mean, I think my mind was telling me that, hey, you're gonna lose your sense enjoyment if you stay around here, So I tried to book a flight out of there, and I couldn't find one. So fortunately, I got to stay for the Rath Yatra, and fortunately got to be to help Jayananda Prabhu with the cart and hear Srila Prabhupada give a couple of classes. And so after that, nothing was ever the same. I mean, that was that glance at Srila Gurudev that really, I think, did it. So then later on, as the years went by, different people would come to our home in Nashville. Balavanta Prabhu came, and Radhanath Prabhu. The first time when we first moved to Nashville from Memphis, well, the first couple we ever met was Ron and Wanda Gleaves, and that was Radhanath and Nandapriya. So we bought a house, and then they bought the house right next door to us. So different devotees would come, like Balavanta Prabhu, and then Justadumna Maharaj. At that time, he came several times. Even Brahma's bus came and had a bunch of brahmacharis, stayed for a few days, and Girdhari Prabhu came. So we had lots of senior devotees coming and visiting us and helping us in our Krishna consciousness. But then I guess it was I'm not sure about the year here, Rupanuga Prabhu, was it 1978 or Radhanath, was it 1978 that Srila Gurudev came to our house? I think it was.
Yes, it was the latter part of 78.
Okay, so in 1978, Srila Gurudev came with Justadumna Maharaj and a young devotee named Bhakta Dev. He was later Damodar. And
are you muted?
Return Prabhu, we lost your sound somehow.
I want you all to quit your jobs.
You're back on now. Please continue.
Okay. So when Srila Gurudev came through, after all these many devotees that would come and help us, he just kind of just said, okay, I want you, gave us the instruction, I want you to quit your job, sell your house, and move to Dallas. And so we all did that. We all had nice jobs, nice houses and everything, but Srila Gurudev was just so convincing that we we all just sold our house and moved to Dallas. And it was kind of a shock for the devotees here because we thought we had downsized because, we've sold a bunch of furniture and stuff. But when we moved here, I know Radhanath and I both had the biggest U-Haul you could rent, and it was full of just as packed as you can get it. And so when we pulled into this community, there were so many, mostly brahmacharis and very renounced devotees here. And here we come with all our possessions, and so it was a real shock to them, and it was a real shock to us also, because the housing here was, it was not like it was where we came from. Many of the houses were, like Srila Gurudev mentioned in his talk, that they were really run down in really bad conditions. This area here was not such a very nice area either. Wasn't uncommon to hear gunshots every other night. So just to back up a little bit, before I got initiated, I had Leela and I, my wife Leela and I, we flew here. And so they put us up in a house, I think that Yoga Maya lives in now. And so we were sleeping on the floor, and that night there was like roaches crawling on us. And so I was thinking, no, there's no way Leela's gonna move to this place, but she did, she agreed. And so we moved here in 1979, I think it was August of 1979. And before that, I had come in June and got initiated by Srila Gurudev. And I think that was that day was also his Vyas Puja day. So I got initiated, and one of the questions that Jayashree Mataji wanted me to speak about also was the first service that I had at the temple. So I was brand new, and we were living, I guess we were living down the block a little bit on Gurley. But at that time, the temple had all these speakers that on both sides of the outside, the exterior part of the temple. And you can make an announcement and you could hear it for like 3 blocks, I mean, the neighbors love that, that we can make these announcements like at 4:30 in the morning and wake them up. So anyway, I was in my house and I heard the announcement, Bhakta Mike, come to the temple, Bhakta Mike. So I ran up to the temple and they said, okay, we're going to give you the service of making Srila Prabhupada's tray every day. And Radhanath, when I told Radhanath Prabhu, he said, oh, you're the luckiest. He said, you're so lucky you get to make Prabhupada's tray. And I felt that way. I felt like, oh, how could, what an amazing service I got to do. So that was actually my first service that I guess I performed at the temple. And then later on, we had many types of Sankirtan. The temple owned we owned a candle making business at that time. And we made these candles with all kinds of animals. And so we would make the candles and then we would go out on Sankirtan and sell them. And then after that, came painting Sankirtan. I did a little bit of book distribution, not a lot at the airports, but just mostly, different types of paraphernalia and everything. And so another question was how I assisted Srila Gurudev in his mission. I mean, to answer that, I don't know that I really assisted that much, but I did do Sankirtan. And when he would come, when Srila Gurudev would come to Dallas, I got to actually be with him in the evenings. And one of the ways I got to do that, I guess the reason I got to do that is because one night Srila Gurudev had everybody up in his room, or allowed the devotees in his room. And he, afterwards, he said, okay, everybody can go now. So I got up to leave and Jivananda Prabhu said, no, just sit down. That's what Srila Gurudev said, we should leave. He said, no, just sit down. So I sat there and Srila Gurudev just kept talking to us. And then so that became a habit every night. And so finally Srila Gurudev allowed me to be his servant in the evenings. And such an amazing service. It was a time where he didn't really want to talk about management at all. He just wanted to, light talk about how's this devotee doing, or he'd ask me sometime how the cow bums, he called them still the cowboys, how the cow bums are doing. And so I would read to him sometimes. And so that was probably my favorite time of being with Srila Gurudev, because he would sometimes tell me about how he grew up in New York, and like a dummy, I didn't think to write down any of these things that he was telling me, because now I can't remember hardly any of it. But that's kind of my, well, I'll tell you one kind of funny story. When Jivananda told me he was a vegetarian back then, he was going to come to to Nashville, because that was part of his territory. And so he was going to come and stay with us in our house. And so my wife said, well, what do I cook him? I don't know what to cook him. He's a vegetarian. And I said, well, just boil him some eggs. I said, probably just boil a few eggs, and he'll like that. And so when he came, he said, no, I don't eat eggs either. We were thinking, God, what do vegetarians eat? Which, of course, they eat vegetables, but anyway, he would come, and every time he would come to Nashville, he would always stay with us at our house. And then I would go to Knoxville, and I would go over to his house. And so he helped me so much, and was the very first one to ever, introduce me to Krishna consciousness. So I owe him so much, Jivananda Prabhu. So I think that's answering all the questions that Mother Jayshree asked me to speak about. So, talking about condition of the houses here, it was really bad when we first moved here. And I remember Srila Gurudev saying in class one day that nobody is attracted to poverty. So he wanted to really upgrade all these houses, and especially its Temple Room. Like he said, it was a basketball court before. And then he had like Pasupati Prabhu and I forgot the Maharaj's name, that Surabi Maharaj designed it. And so we got to see that gradually as the temple got improved over and over, and then the altar itself, Srila Gurudev really loved the altar. He said, trying to decorate that altar was trying to decorate a diamond. It was such a beautiful, many people that come to our temple say it's one of the nicest temples, and that's all due to Srila Gurudev's mercy, so I think that's, unless, I guess we'll have questions later on if somebody wants to ask. So I think we can go to either Radhanath or Rupanuga Prabhu now.
Maturnath, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Would you describe walking into that house that is now, we call it the duplex that you purchased after you sold your house in Nashville? Yeah. Would you describe that experience of walking into that house and looking around?
Oh wow! So Jivananda Prabhu and I went over to look inside that house, and when we got in there, it was like we went into a different lower planet or something. The people that lived there were, I don't know, I can't describe how they looked, like it was Halloween or something. Like they had bites all over them, and they had stuff like growing in the bathroom, and it was terrible. They had children also, and all the children had like just bites all over them, and we couldn't figure out what it was. And we walked out and we were covered in fleas. There were just fleas all over us. So that's just one example of the houses that we had in this community. And Srila Gurudev was so intelligent that, because I think we bought that house, Rupanuga Prabhu, I think we bought that house for like $14,000 or something like that. So back then, it was you could really get a good price on some houses. So yeah, that was quite the experience going into that thing. It's like walking in, like I said, into a different world, like a lower planet or something. So.
For a comparison, that house will probably go now for about 400,000.
Exactly. Yeah. All right, thank you so much. I mean, there's so many stories that we can add, and I think sometimes we should, as part of this, that we should, you know, like when the devotees get together and they start telling their pastimes, you know, with Srila Gurudev, that would be nice to do that also, because there's so many wonderful stories that different devotees have of their experiences of being with Srila Gurudev.
Thank you so much, Materna Prabhu. Like you said, there's so much more that can be said, but I appreciate you not only keeping to your allotted time, but actually keeping it even shorter. And hopefully we can hear more, you know, as questions come up. And we'll introduce our next speaker, His Grace Radhanath Prabhu. Radhanath Prabhu was introduced to Krishna consciousness in 1976 by his future godbrother, His Grace Maternath Prabhu. They were close friends and next door neighbors in Nashville, Tennessee, as we heard from Materna Prabhu. They regularly visited Murari Sevak and began their spiritual life. In 1978, during his visit through Tennessee, they were introduced to their future spiritual master, His Divine Grace Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj. He told them of the plan to start the householder community here in Dallas and asked them to first come and visit. And he said, in true Gurudev fashion, the visit became an order for these 4 families from across the state of Tennessee to make their move into Dallas in 1979. He's currently serving the cows that offer milk to their lordships, Shri Radha Kalachandji here at the temple, and also does landscaping services around the temple and the restaurant here. And that is also just a drop in a huge bucket of services that have been performed by His Grace Radhanath Prabhu over the years. So Radhanath Prabhu, go ahead and speak about your experiences here, your initial days here in the early 80s.
It's Kishore, before Radhanath speaks, I have to tell a story when you mentioned Murari Sevak, because okay. I took Radhanath, he and I went to Murari Sevak one time, and so we took a drink of the water there, and it had a really bad smell. So then we took a shower, and the shower smelled terrible also. And Radhanath kept saying something wrong with the water, and I said, no, it's just there's probably just some minerals in the water that smell bad. So throughout the day, we would try to drink a little water and stuff and everything. And so finally, one of the devotees came up and he said, whatever you do, don't drink the water. He said, a skunk fell in the well, so don't drink the water. And so we, you know, Radhanath, he probably could have punched me at that time, you know, because I was just telling him, no, keep drinking. And then another time when Srila Gurudev came to visit us, well, they told us that you should have a lot of flowers, because you should offer flowers to them, make a garland. We didn't know anything about making garlands, but make a garland. And so Radhanath and I went out and looking for flowers. And so just so happened they were having a funeral and they were putting all these flowers on this gravestone there. And so they were getting ready to leave, and Radhanath and I looked at each other and we said, wow, there's a lot of flowers there. So we waited until the people left, and we ran over and we like raided the tombstone and got a bunch of flowers that we, I guess, in turn offered to Srila Gurudev. So I just wanted those 2 stories popped in my mind. So I wanted to tell those about Radhanath and I. Sorry, Radhanath, I just want to tell those stories.
I had totally forgot about the skunk. So are you ready for me, Mother Kishore?
Yes, please.
We're all ready for you, Radha.
Thank you very much for having this. This is I've always thought it would be better served as a round table if there was a way to get this, because one story helps you to remember another one. So to keep with what I was asked to do, pretty much everything Mathuranath Prabhu said, I was right there with him.
Radhanath Prabhu, we lost you for a minute.
Okay, how about now?
Got your voice
For
back?
some reason, my phone's.
All right, you're back
There
on.
you go. Can you hear me now?
Yes, okay.
All right, so I have to kind of clear the air. Whenever Srila Gurudev would get upset with me, he would always look at Jivananda Prabhu and said, "You deal with him, you brought him." That really wasn't the truth. The real truth is I had a man crush on Mathuranath, and whatever he did had to have been the best thing in the world. I was very fortunate to have his association, and I remember how happy he was when he first came back from meeting Jivananda, and he's like telling me all these wonderful things that this person had told him. Quite honestly, I was kind of jealous. It's like, wait a minute, here's a guy cutting in on my man crush. What's up with that? But slowly, I came across to the other side. I was not a seeker. Rupanuga Prabhu, when he comes on, and he's told me so many times, and hopefully tells you how for years he wanted to find the way back to God, even though he didn't know how to say it. I was not like that. I was just a big enjoyer. Really never thought anything would come of the whole Krishna consciousness thing until 1978, when Srila Gurudev made his trip through. Actually, I think he'd been to Chicago, St. Louis, and he was on his way to Dallas, and he stopped in Knoxville, Nashville, and Chattanooga because there was devotees strung across the state. I recall that I had little tiny Gornitai deities, and I had taken one of my son's bedroom away from him and got him bunk beds and made a temple room. And I had this gosh awful chair that just sitting in the chair itself was uncomfortable. It was just a gosh awful chair, but for somehow or another, I thought that would be the perfect asan for this person who was coming. So not only was the chair bad, I made it worse by putting cushions in it, because then he could sit up higher. And Gurudev was so gracious. He said, "So you want me to sit there?" I was like, yeah, I got this chair for you. And he very kindly sat there and was very, very tolerant of all the offenses that I don't know about everybody else, but I know that I had to have committed. And I don't know if this was an order or not, but I, at the time, I had a couple, but I had this big basset hound. And for those of you not familiar with that, they have these long, droopy ears, this long, huge body. And I remember after walking from Mathuranath Prabhu's house to my house, he looked at me and said, "If you come to Dallas, you're not going to bring that dog, right?" So, and I think that her name was Petunia, and I believe she ended up living her life out at Mother Leela's mother's house.
Yeah.
But anyhow, during the 1978 visit, it was, for me, it was eye-opening, because I had wanted to be a Baptist minister. So, and I'd always thought that there was just something off about that philosophy. So when I heard about Krishna consciousness, particularly meeting Dristaduna Maharaj and then Gurudev coming, it all started making purpose. So as Mathuranath Prabhu said, Gurudev asked us to come down here and be a part of the tea and already planned out. And kind of interesting how it happened, because he called us down here in January or February, something like that. Walked us around the community and showed us what his plans were. And we were like, oh, well, good luck with that, because it was just a dump. And, but we trusted him. Again, I probably never even thought at that time anything would ever come of it. It was still some fantasy thing. So he explained to us, that you Krishna consciousness, you just add Krishna to your life. But it would be nice if y'all did that down here, then you could help us out. But take your time, because you want to make sure that you're on the right path. So we all, went back to our respective homes and contemplated what we were going to do. Were we going to do it? I think it was probably easier for Jivananda Prabhu, because he had been involved so long, had already been to Gitanagari. Rupanuga Prabhu was very close to him, so I think he was also ready, and so was Mathuranath. But I'm just thinking, this is some fantasy. So after that visit, we were told to take our time. Gurudev called us back down there in like 6 weeks. And at that meeting, it wasn't quite like the first. I remember sitting up in his room and his saying, so we talked about y'all coming down here, being part of this community. And so what are y'all thinking? And I don't remember what everybody said, but I do remember that Gurudev said, look, one of us said, you told us to think about it. He goes, you've had 6 weeks. What's the problem? Come on. And so I would say that was the first true instruction, was disentangle yourself in Tennessee and get down to Dallas. So we did. I actually moved down here with Mathuranath Prabhu. I gave up my job. I worked for a railroad, which I hated, and came down and actually left my wife and 2 sons up there with the hope that the house would sell shortly, because our savings was not that great. But Krishna provided for us, and the end of the summer of 1979, we made the move down here. I was told, because I had been going to college to be a elementary education teacher, that I would be involved in the Gurukula. Well, okay, that's cool. And then Gurudev told us about his plans for the Gurukula, and originally it was going to be on top of the main building where the restaurant and the gift shop are, but that was later on, because structurally it couldn't be done. So once I got down here, I was waiting for whatever instruction, and I recall Dristaduna Maharaj taking me up to Srila Gurudev's quarters, and him talking about what I had done at the railroad, and I had been a manager at the railroad. I had kind of worked my way up where I was, I was a manager. So Gurudev said it would just be a shame to waste all these years of management that you've been trained in. And being an ashram, being a school teacher is very hard. It's very hard. These kids have chanted, hundreds and thousands of rounds in their previous lives. And, he just gave me all these reasons why I would not make a good Gurukula teacher, but I would make a great temple manager. So my first service in Dallas I was the temple commander. Back then, temple commander meant you try to get people to do things, and if they don't do it, then it's your job. So I became very well versed in mopping the floors, washing the pots, pretty much anything that everybody else wouldn't do. That's what I got to do. But within a short period of time, I was promoted to work in the treasury, who then was Giridhari Prabhu, who is now His Holiness Giridhari Maharaj. And he was extremely helpful in my Krishna consciousness. So since it's part of history, everybody knows that in the 80s, the Guru reform movement started. And our spiritual master was, I didn't know this at the time. We were kind of kept in the dark about a lot of things. But we just understood that he was going to be leaving us for some period of time. It was undetermined, and he was going to be, traveling in India and starting the China mission. So we were gung ho to help him with that. Well, as we now know, he was exiled to Mayapur and to Hong Kong to start the China mission. And for us, we had different people brought in to be our management, and it was actually quite a time of upheaval, particularly for those of us in Dallas. And after some period of time, things just weren't going well. And we had, before Srila Gurudev left, we had actually started construction on the new temple room. He alluded to that in the Istagosti from what the video was from. And Radha Kalachandji was standing at the back of the gymnasium, which is what it was, and the work was going on their altar. So after some period of time, sooner rather than later, Srila Gurudev came back and took over the zone again, but he took it over minus Chicago and St. Louis. So it was, at the time we had Harmony Farms, New Kurukshetra had been started in Oklahoma. So we had New Kurukshetra, Dallas, and Houston. And we had lost a tremendous amount of devotees. There had been some bartering, whatever, with devotees. And Srila Gurudev was left with mostly his disciples. And we, practically all of us, had been initiated in late 1979 and into 1980. So when he came back, at least for me, I thought, well, because we were very unstable financially, and when I thought that we would take things slow, get things built back up. Srila Gurudev came back and said, okay, we're going to finish the temple room. We're going to build a restaurant, and he just had this whole list of things. And it's like, wow, how is this ever going to happen? And he employed Pandava Vijay Prabhu, who was the temple president, or at the time he wasn't, but because we lost so many people, that there was really no qualified people to take over the management. So Pandava Vijay was appointed to take over the management in Houston, and Srila Gurudev had tagged me to take over the management in Dallas, which included finishing up the temple room. And I listened to Mother Nandini last weekend talk about the restaurant, and she mentioned some of the people's names, but some of the people whose names should go down in history are Shyam Sundar Prabhu, who is our godbrother, who is Indian bodied and lives in India. He was a very good artist. Pashupati Prabhu, who is really the architect of so many things. I could speak for hours on what had to be done to make the temple room the temple room. Jagopal Prabhu, excellent carpenter. Nakula Das Brahmachari, who was a Sankirtan devotee for Radha Damodar. He also was very artistic. And I believe our godbrother's name was Shukananda. And last I heard, he was in North Carolina, but the magnificent ceiling in the temple room is still to this day the way that Shukananda did it. And for my part, I read the Mahabharata to him every day. I wasn't so much involved in the construction. I was just trying to do what I could to, in terms of temple management. But that also meant, besides being the temple manager, also washing the pots in the morning and whatever. But we didn't know it was austere. For us, it was that's what Gurudev brought to. So, we just And then after some period of time, temple room was finished, and I'll go into the great, but the morning that we actually moved lordships to their new altar was one of the most glorious I've ever been involved in. Srila Gurudev micromanaged every inch of it, every step of the way that we took them to their altar. And of course, after that, we were like, okay, ready to take a break. Let's take a breather, because that was just one big marathon. To finish this thing up. And then Gurudev immediately says, all right, now we're going to start the restaurant. And lo and behold, at that time, I was relieved from my managerial duties, thank goodness. And I believe it was Kalachandji Prabhu who took over the temple management. And I got to join the construction crew. And one of the first things we did was put a new tar roof on the temple. None of us had ever done any of this stuff. And I remember that we had an accident. Jayagopal Prabhu was very badly burned. And Gurudev would regularly go and see him and give him so much mercy for what he had, for the sacrifice that he had made. So at any rate, we worked very hard. I believe our god brother Balaram Prabhu, who had been at the farm, came in and was assisting us. So it was very interesting turning what is now the outdoor patio. That was the courtyard. But of course, Gurudev and Pashupati had planned this whole thing out and came to fruition. It's been alluded, or it was spoken about last week about the restaurant, and that in itself is quite the story. How the restaurant got started, the popularity, and how that's really how the preaching in Dallas got kickstarted. But there are a lot of things that happened during the time that when Gurudev first came back. As Mathuranath was talking about how he was fortunate to go up and sit in Srila Gurudev's room at night because it was quiet time. I had the unfortunacy of, in one sense, it was fortunate because I got a lot of Gurudev's association, which meant you also got a lot of Gurudev's association in terms of chastisement, because he was expert and he expected us to become expert. And I don't know if Mathuranath or Rupanuga Prabhu recall, but I got kicked out of the room several nights because Srila Gurudev would just look at me. And then I remember one morning I was in the temple room chanting my rounds. And this is after he had already kicked me out at night a couple of times. So he calls me over to his Vyasa where he was chanting his rounds. And he said, I know you don't understand. He said, and I love that you're here. And I love that you come up at night. He said, but when I look at you, I can only think of management. So because of that, you have to get out of my sight. And then he kicked me out of the temple room. So it was, anyhow, it was different. One thing I wanted to include before I finish up what I've got to say, and again, this is only scratching the surface of all the wonderful things that happened with His Divine Grace during those times. It in itself it was incredible. But His Holiness Chapataka Maharaj, in one of the Mahotsava talks, said that the golden thread of Tamal Krishna Goswami is weaved throughout the entire fabric of ISKCON. From my perspective, and I hope from some of my God brothers and God sisters' perspective, is that Dallas is the golden thread of Tamal Krishna Goswami. And each of us had an opportunity to weave our little threads in and out of there. But everything that Dallas is today, true, I mean, in my opinion, the foundation in 1979, it was his vision. It was he who caused it all to come to fruition. And for that, I think each and every one of us owe him an eternal debt. And in conclusion, I would like to ask Mother Shabia and whoever else in management. You get to see a lot of the guys talking. You know, as Gurdev alluded to, there were 4 men. It wasn't just men that came. We had wives. And I know in Mathuranath and I's case, our wives came kicking and screaming because they didn't want to be here. But by Krishna's mercy, they came. And I think each of them have a story in and of their own. So I would hope that y'all have this type of venue and invite them to give their perspectives. I know that Nanda Priya Devi had quite a few interesting interactions with Surya Das Prabhu. Anyhow, they also were major contributors to this community in the early days. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. And Rupanuga Prabhu, I think you're up.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Nirti.
Before you start, Rupanuga, we'll introduce you, but I just wanted to thank Radhanath Prabhu for beautiful stories and memories, and also for acknowledging all of your wives who are as exalted and not only came here, but also stayed here and tolerated so much and helped so much build this community. They're the female pillars of our community and our mothers. So thank you so much, Radhanath Prabhu, and also for keeping with the time. All of you are really good with that today. And I'll introduce our next speaker, His Grace Rupanuga Prabhu. Rupanuga Prabhu was born in 1944 in Mobile, Alabama, and was there until 1954. He then moved into, it says, Mother's Home Community in Mississippi, and completed high school in 1962. Later, he completed his bachelor's degree in engineering in 1968 at Mississippi State University. In August of 1968, he married His Grace Jayanti Devi Dasi, and I believe she's here with us also. They spent the next 11 years living and working in East Tennessee. He first encountered the Hare Krishna devotees in June of 1973 and became a life member of New Vrindavan community. In 1977, he first began associating with the devotees in Knoxville, Tennessee, and later moved to Dallas community in 1979. In 1980, he took his first initiation from His Holiness Tamal Krishna Goswami Srila Gurudev, and second initiation the following year. In 1980, he worked with the temple, raising funds and performing other services until 1992, at which time he began teaching at the Gurukul. He taught high school Gurukul of boys from 1992 till 1996. He then enrolled himself in the master's program of teachers education at the University of North Texas, and from June 1996 to December of 1997. He received his master's at that time in teaching, and was teaching English composition and literature at local colleges until 2014. He then retired from public teaching, but later he also taught English composition and literature for 2 years in the Dallas Gurukul. He presently participates in various activities and services here. He often gives classes, and he also helps Radhanath Prabhu with maintaining the yards here, the grounds here, and so many other Pujari services and such. So Rupanuga Prabhu, thank you for joining us today, and we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Nirti Kishori Devi. And my obeisances to my god brothers and to my god sisters, and all of those who did not take initiation necessarily from Tamal Krishna Goswami, but I also consider you my god brothers and god sisters. So my obeisances to you all. while we were in Tennessee, we spent the last several years around Knoxville. And in 1973, Gianti and I gave up my nice job with the Tennessee Valley Authority and moved out into the land about 45 miles north of Knoxville, around Maynardville, Tennessee. We were living in the hills, in the foothills of the mountains there. This is part of the Appalachian country, and there was an established community of good people there. Great deal of ignorance, but still nice people who welcomed us in there. Me with my long hair and beard, and Gianti wearing short shorts and a halter top and having a baby on her hip. Anyhow, that was where we spent the next 4 years. That was from like 73 until 78 or 77, actually. Then we lived in a shanty that was only 3 rooms, and it had no plumbing. We did have wiring in the house, so we had electricity, but we got our water from a spring down under the hill, and we cut firewood on our property to heat the house with. So this is the way we lived for 4 years at that time, from 73 to 77. And during that time, we made one trip up to New Vrindavan community, stayed for about 1 hour, did not get invited to go into the temple room at all. I think they were celebrating Janmashtami at that time, but I have no idea what that was. Anyhow, we met Kirtanananda Maharaj, who was very kind to us and made sure that we got some prasadam. So then after about an hour or so of talking with some people, we left and went to visit some hippie friends over in Iowa. And then back down to Maynardville, Tennessee, where we were living. Anyhow, during that time period that we were in the mountains, I did a lot of reading in Prabhupada's books. And so there was one instruction in Bhagavad Gita saying that it's better for a person to perform his own activity, his own type of work, even though it seemed to be full of faults, than to do the work of another, even though it appeared to be faultless. And so I took that into account, and for 4 years, I'd been trying to get a rural community, self-sufficient rural community started, but without a great deal of success because of the type of people that I was working with, and also because of my own lack of advancement in spiritual life. So we moved back into Oak Ridge, Tennessee, where I took a job again with the Oak Ridge National Lab as an engineer. And we worked there for about 2 years, and it was so difficult coming back into that workplace after being out in the hills, just roaming around and doing whatever little work I could find to do. It was so difficult to come back into that work situation that I was just praying to Krishna, please give me some association. Within a short time, we heard that there was a couple living over in Knoxville. And so since everyone had landline telephones at that time, I used a directory and found this person named Jim Champion and started trying to call them, and tried about 3 or 4 days to call them and got no response. And then finally somebody answers the phone, and I asked the lady her name, and she says, Barbara. Well, as it turns out, Jivananda and Bhakti Lata had been up at Gita Nagari during those days that I was trying to reach them, receiving first initiation from Srila Prabhupada. And of course, he had been doing a lot of work with the Radha Damodara traveling Sankirtan party, making arrangements that books get sent to different parts of the world. So it was with them, they lived 20 miles from where we were living. And we started visiting every weekend and having a little program there. They had converted one of their rooms in their kind of modern house. It converted it to a temple room. with Gornitai, little Gornitai deities. So that's where we began really getting some of our first hands-on, close-up interaction with other devotees. So then, as Maturnath Prabhu was saying, he also met Jivananda, and then he gave the knowledge to his next door neighbor, Radhanath Prabhu. And so we owe a great deal of credit to our having come to Krishna consciousness, to Jivananda and Mother Bhakti Lata, because they were the ones that kind of showed us some of the real, you know, the normal activities of devotees, you know, when they're doing temple worship. And they were cooking up a feast on Sunday and having quite a, you know, several people come over. We were one of those. So he was the one that had introduced us also to Tamal Krishna Goswami. That was pretty shortly after Srila Prabhupada's disappearance in 1977. So as a result of that meeting, then that Srila Gurudev made to Knoxville in 78, we made the decision along with Radhanath and Maturnath Prabhu to come to Dallas and give it a try. Of course, we had less to leave than they did, but we still went through the process of selling a lot of our stuff and then loading up in an 18-wheeler trailer all of our stuff along with Jivananda and his household goods. And there was a devotee there at the time who was the mechanic around here. What was his name?
Janapavana.
Janapavana. And he and this other young devotee, Paripurna, came to Knoxville and helped us to load up things. And they brought all of our stuff down to Dallas. And this was in probably April, May of 1979. And so when we got here, we began having some difficulties with our youngest child, who was only 3 months old when we moved. And because of that problems that we had, and the fact that the houses that we were trying to live in were in such dilapidated condition, as Maturnath was describing, we didn't last but about 7 months here. And then we just made the decision very quickly to move back to Mississippi, where we had grew up, where we had grown up. And so I gave a call down to the Mississippi farm and talked with the temple president there, whose name was also Nityananda Das. He was a disciple of Prabhupada. And he said, yes, we will rent you the little house that you saw down here in one of your visits. We'll rent that to you. And so I went and found a job in New Orleans with Southern Bell as an engineer. And so we were prepared to make that move down to the new Taliban, the Mississippi farm. But Srila Gurudev sent Nityananda and Mother Bhakti Lata by the place that we were staying, my parents' house, and about Christmas time. And Gurudev was just asking us to write to him. And so we did. And as a result of the letters that he wrote back, one to Jayanti and one to me, we made the decision that we should move back to Dallas. So this was going to be the third time that we'd spent $500 to move to Dallas, to leave Dallas, and to move back to Dallas. So we spent about $1,500 trying to get settled in Dallas. And so we came, but the houses were pretty bad. So we went ahead, we got permission to purchase a house one street over from the temple. And so that was the first house that we purchased here in Dallas. And as Maturnath was saying, the prices were really low at that time on these houses. I think we paid $18,000 for that house. So now that house is probably worth, what did you say, Maturnath? About 200, 250,000 something?
Probably more.
More than that now. So anyhow, my first job here in Dallas was to do lawn care. But because my youngest son at that time, Bart, had so many difficulties, we were in and out of the hospital so many times during that 7-month period that that didn't work out too well. And then when I came back here a year later to stay in 1980, then I tried working outside some, but I just couldn't do it. So Gurday gave me permission to become the temple treasurer at that time, and Radhanath was promoted to the position of temple president. So we did that, and then over the next few years, we spent a lot of time going out and doing sales of this artwork. We would buy artwork from I think from Hong Kong and also from Taiwan. And we did that to raise money to, for the temple projects that were going on the farm and also for building up the temple room and the restaurant, did all that. And so then eventually Drista Prabhu, who was the first headmaster of our school, he and his wife left and went to North Carolina, I guess sometime around 1985, 86. And so that's when my wife Jayanti, she had already been teaching in the school, but now she had placed into her lap unrequested the leadership of the school, principalship of our local community school. And so for the next many years, then we performed various activities around, a lot of them that were related to the Gurukula. And so Jayanti continued that until 2014. I ran out of kids during 4 years that I was teaching there. My kids all got to be 10th, 11th graders, 12th graders, and they wanted to go on to the community college that was close by. So I had to decide what I was going to do. And that's when I went back to University of North Texas in 96 and got a degree in teaching and with enough graduate hours in English that I could teach English courses in the local community colleges. And so that's what I was doing until 2014. In other words, we both left the teaching profession pretty much in 2014. And so now we're just kind of worthless old people. But we still have a lot of fun. We got grandkids that my wife has to take care of now. And every chance I get, every chance I can afford to do so now with gasoline prices so high, I go out to Radhanath's place and he and I will cut wood, split wood, shovel manure, and he's already doing a big service out there by taking care of the cows and horses that he's got in place. So anyhow, that's my big outlet now that I'm really not of much use around the temple. But it's been an interesting it's been about 42 years now, 43 years almost since we moved back to Dallas the second time. And this time we didn't leave. We've been on the same block over here on Perry Avenue for about 42, 43 years. And so we find ourselves now at the what does Gurdev says, at the fag end of our lives, and wondering what can we do significant to help push this movement forward. And so far we've just we've done the necessary things just to keep the household going and take care of grandkids and do whatever little bit of service we can do at the temple. So that's the story of Rupanuga and Jayanti's life. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Rupanuga, for giving us a little bit of, like all of you said, there's probably we could hear from each of you for a few hours, just of all of the, more details of what it was like to move here, what it was like back in those days, all the different services that you performed. So, but you all kept it very brief. So we do have some more time and some more questions for you to turn this just a little bit more. if anyone else would like to raise a question to any of our speakers, you can put those in the chat or raise your hand. Otherwise, Rajeshwari Devi, is she still here on the call? And myself, we also came up with a few questions. So, is Rajeshwari here? I had a few questions. Just maybe a little bit more of what the community was like. And this is for any of you that you'd like to respond to this. What the community, you moved here, when you first moved, like you said, there was a lot of, not a lot, but there were some brahmacharis. It was very simple. You spoke about the housing situation, and then gradually things changed a little bit until Srila Gurudev came back. So what was the community feel like? What were some of your, like, what was the mood? What were the relationships like? What were the outreach, programs that you did at that time? How did things develop and change over the years? Any lessons that you've learned from those early days that you carry today, or that you can offer us to take from the experiences you had at that time? Maybe some of your most challenging services, most rewarding services, most memorable services from that time. And just not only that you came here in the 80s, many people came here, but you are some of the three that came and stayed all this time. So you've been here in this community, like you said, for about 42, 43 years. So maybe any reflections of everything that this community has gone through, how it developed and evolved. So this was more than one question, a lot of maybe some things for you to think of, and maybe things like that you would like to share with us.
Well, when we first, back in 79, 80s, when we first came, there was a lot of very senior devotees. We had the biggest book distributors, I think, in the whole movement. We had Tripurari Prabhu, we had Vaiseshika Prabhu, Pragosh, Surya, so many, senior Prabhupada disciples, and everybody came to Mangalartik. If you didn't come to Mangalartik, you got a call. And so I remember my wife, Leela, I got a call one morning, and they said, one day, why didn't you come to Mangalartik? And I said, well, my wife had a baby last night. And they said, they didn't, it wasn't like, well, congratulations or anything. They just said, well, make sure you come tomorrow. So you had, and at one time they even took roll and they would publish it, okay, Rupanuga Prabhu, he attended like 28 Mangalartiks this month or something, so they would publish that. And they even put guards at the door. So if you tried to get out of the temple room, you had to go past a guard, and you'd have to tell him, hey, look, I'm sorry, I have to go to the bathroom. And so they would walk you to the bathroom and back. So it was a lot different then. I mean, it was, I think that because of that, we have a pretty good foundation that we built, but it was very strict back then. Everybody ate breakfast at the same time, pretty much. And pretty much breakfast was peanuts and raisins, wasn't it, Rupanuga, or watermelon?
Yogurt and bananas.
Yogurt and bananas, yeah. And like someone was saying, I remember Radhanath can probably tell this better, but each householder got like, what was it, Radhanath, $5 a week or something?
10 if you had children.
10 if you had children, and that's what you had to live on, So, very austere. Every evening when Srila Gurudev was in Dallas, we would go in the darshan room, and every night we would go there, and he and Drastuna Maharaj, they would lead kirtan, and then some of the Sankirtan devotees would bring guests, and Srila Gurudev would talk to them, or he would give a little class. So it was, it was like your full day was just nothing but Krishna conscious, So it was definitely different back then.
Yeah. Are you bringing up the Mangalarti police as a recommendation for us to adopt today, or?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I can't, I'd have to start coming myself before I try to tell anyone else to, yeah. And then, those, as Radhanath Prabhu was saying, later on, a lot of those devotees, senior devotees left. And so it was kind of like, we had to kind of take up some of that responsibility. Radhanath Prabhu became temple president, and Rupanuga Prabhu, I had two sons that went to the Gurukul, and they'll tell you to this day that he was the best teacher they ever had. They have so much respect for him because he was just such an amazing teacher, and just such an amazing, not just teaching, but example for them, to live by. So I really haven't ever said that to him, but I really, appreciate that and thank him for that. So sorry, if anybody else wants to comment on the early days.
Nritya Kishore,
Yes, Prabhu.
we talked about our time here when we came to Dallas, about how degraded the houses were, and the whole neighborhood was just falling apart because there was practically the only residents that were still here were old white women who were widows. And many of the other houses were being just rented out to migrant workers or just, but the whole community was just really bad. But we were not the pioneers, because who is the Maternat, who is the devotee that conducts the parikrams now in Braj, a lot of them?
Bandhu Prabhu.
Who?
Dinabandhu Prabhu.
Dinabandhu Prabhu. He was with the first group of people, as I understand it, who left California at the request of Prajapati Prabhu, who was a student, I think, a student at SMU at that time, Southern Methodist University. He was a theology student there, and he somehow or other met the devotees out there and said to them, "Why don't you guys come and start something in Dallas?" So Dinabandhu Prabhu and a few others, I think they had a VW bug that they piled into, and they came to Dallas. And as far as I know, the first place they rented was on Mission Street, aptly named, I think. But they had the upstairs part of a two-story wood-framed house. And there were some people renting the lower part. And Dinabandhu Prabhu told me that when the devotees were going to bed, that's when the group downstairs were just getting started with their partying. But, they got back at them because the next morning, early in the morning, then the devotees upstairs would wake up and they'd start their activities, including, the kirtans and the mridanga play, all that. But eventually they moved to a much nicer part of Dallas, which is called the Turtle Creek area. And they rented a place there. And I think it was from there that they found this property that is now the temple, found it available, and they made the arrangements that it was purchased. And I think, Maternat, I think you told earlier that there's the two temple buildings that are right side by side, and then the house that is just closest to it that belonged, to various people. Different people stayed in it, including my wife and I. That was the first place we stayed in when we came to Dallas. So anyhow, those were the real pioneers. They were the ones. By the time we got here, the temple building had already been purchased, and at least a few residences had been purchased also at a very low price. And you talked about the cost of the housing, Maternat. Some of those houses, as I remember right, the ones where the parking lot now is, I think one of those houses was what, $6,000, $7,000, something like that. And so when Rameshwar Maharaj came and walked around with Gurudev, he told Gurudev, buy as much of this property as you can get your hands on. And that turned out to be very prophetic, because now the whole community is so much nicer than it was then. the devotees have done things. They purchased their own houses. Some of them purchased from the temple, some of them from other individuals around the area. And so they made the houses nicer. It's a much more decent place. It was a kind of a dangerous place when we first came. As Maternot was saying, we heard gunshots every night, just about it. And I remember that there were helicopters flying over with a bright spotlight shining down in our area. This happened pretty regularly too. Someone would, commit a crime of some kind, break into a building or something, and the helicopters were just buzzing around our community for some time. So this was a little bit about the nature of the place that we found here, but we had it all kind of handed to us, even though it wasn't much of a nice gift. But still, the basis had already been formed for the community when we got here in '79.
Thank you for sharing a bit more of that history. And again, there is clearly a lot of respect that we offer to those original pioneers. We know that's always one of the most difficult services to start a community, and especially, like you said, with difficult conditions that were here at that time. And at the same time, I really appreciate those of you who stayed here for all these years. Of course, things are a little bit better now, but you had to tolerate and endure a lot over the years to bring the community to where it is today. So thank you for
Mother Kishore,
being here. Yes.
If I may just have a couple of minutes here, because one thing that
Yes,
I
and can
think
you
is
try to
getting
turn your video
kind
again, Radhanath Prabhu? We can hear you. It
well,
would be
I
nice
would
to
if
see
I
you.
knew how.
All right. Start
The
video.
host asks you to start your video. Okay.
There you are. All right. Please go ahead.
One thing that we failed to mention in all this is when Srila Gurudev came back and took the zone over, and so many of his god brothers left, and he was basically left with his disciples. He did not give up his China mission. What he had started, he continued going on that. So he was making phone calls constantly. I think at the time Giridhari Maharaj was there. I think maybe Gopal Prabhu was there. There were some devotees there. But Srila Gurudev had to micromanage what we did in Dallas because, as I said earlier, we took initiation in 1979, late 79. Madhava Vijay Prabhu was in 1980, and he's running the whole Sankirtan party. And so we did not know. We didn't know. All we was a bunch of enthusiastic young men who would do our spiritual masters. Credit goes to him because everything that we did told us how to do it. He told us the way it needed to be done. And so much of everything that we have now was carved into those early years. And the early years, I mean, when Srila Gurudev came back, and it was just his disciples and himself basically running the zone. I think that we, as disciples of Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj, are extremely fortunate in we had one of the most personable spiritual masters that there's ever been. He made time for each one of us to teach us, to help us through our problems, but he made all of us feel like we were important. And because we all felt that way, we were willing to give that much more to Krishna consciousness and to Prabhupada's mission. I just wanted to mention that because it's, we talked about what we went through. Whatever we went through, for him, it was 100 times worse because he never stopped his world mission just to create the Dallas community as it is. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Radhanath. any other reflections, maybe important instructions that you remember that were given specifically here in Dallas, or if anyone else had any questions for our speakers today.
Nrita Kishore.
Yes,
Sheila Gurdev told Jayanti once after she'd been working at the school for a while, and Drista Prabhu had left and just left everything in her hands. She had to just create everything. Anyhow, he said, whatever you do, don't let the school close. Because, you know, he knew that an attempt had been made in the early 70s to establish an international Gurukula here in Dallas. And people did send their children from all over the world to this community. But then, of course, then the state came in and they had their regulations. And so the school had to close. And I think at that time, Prabhupada said, move the school to Vrindavan. But anyhow, the instruction that he gave to Jayanti at that time, you came along as her assistant, and eventually you would be handed the reins of running the school yourself. So I think Srila Gurudev's women disciples played as I think Radhanath Prabhu was saying, we should have a conversation like this with just the ladies telling their side of the story, because they had to suffer a lot and do without a lot. And our children, as did our children in the early days too. They've got something more to say than we men have said.
Yes, but fortunately, we had the good fortune of hearing from your wife a few weeks back a little bit about her early days here in the school and some horror stories that came there from what she had to tolerate as far as the conditions here that she had to work with at the school and through teaching. But there's certainly more that we can hear from her and from your other wives, or not you, but from Chaitanya Prabhu's wife, from Mother Nandapriya, from Mother Bhaktivana, about their early days here. So I think we would be happy to hear from them if they would be willing to come on here and share. I know all of them are a little shy and not so much into public speaking, but we know how much sacrifices and how much they've had to tolerate here over the years to stay here, to raise their own children here, to support this community. So hopefully if Shaibya, Devi, and Arjashvi Devi can continue to be as persuasive and determined as they are, maybe we will get them here to share their stories as well. Thank you for that. Does anyone else have any additional questions or anything else that we would like to hear that you would like to share today? Because we would love to hear any other challenges from over the years, any specific instructions, anything that you could share would be very beneficial for us to hear.
Well, I think two challenges. One, the first challenge is just like we were just saying, is that, and even Srila Gurudev said this in one of his talks, just being able to live in this community is a challenge. It was then, you know, and it's so much nicer now. I think without a doubt we have, you know, I haven't been to all communities all over the world, but we have the best community there is. We have some of the nicest devotees. And the only direct instruction that Srila Gurudev ever gave me was never leave Dallas. And I hope I can, as long as Dallas tolerates me, I'll stay, you know. So, and then the other one is that when actually, I think Radhanath Prabhu mentioned that when Srila Gurudev was kind of, you know, they kind of came and took over our zone, he was asked to go to China. That was hard times then because, you know, we just didn't understand all what was going on. And it just was, it was a real challenge to stay in ISKCON in general when all of that happened. So that was, I know personally, that was two of my biggest challenges.
Were you able to keep in touch with Srila Gurudev when he was not here? Were you corresponding with him or anything?
Yeah, but that was the only time I ever thought maybe I'm gonna leave the community when all of that happened, because we had, you know, Bhavananda no, not Bhavananda, what was
Bhagwan.
Bhagavan, yeah. He
Bhagavan.
came in and he, you know, and he had his people, and it was tough. It was a tough time because it was very confusing at that time. So I think that was, for me, that was the two biggest challenges. So for my, you know, my wife also just being able to live in this community. When we first moved here, we lived down at the end of Gurley. We rented a house there, and I hated it. It was just, I don't know, it was right by the interstate, and it was just, so then we got to move where Mother Gita Rita lives now. And once we got into that house, I was just like, wow, it was just, I'm in the Dham, and it was just such a peaceful, I felt protected. It was just such a nice feeling. I can't even explain how nice it felt to actually be right here in Radha Kalachandji Dham, you know. So anyway, I love this community. We have some of the best devotees there is in this community, and that's all due to Srila Gurudev, all due to his vision, you know, that he's always been like a step ahead of the whole movement as far as how things should go, you know. He has that vision, and so everything that's good about his community, it's all due to his mercy for sure.
I noticed that Yudhisthira Prabhu is now on with us, and you know, even though it wasn't the early years, I think he needs to be recognized for what he has done to the Dallas community during the years that he was a temple president here. I remember how much Srila Gurudev loved him and how he loved his managerial skills. And one quick little story was Mathuranath Prabhu, myself, and it seemed like there were 2 or 3 others sitting up in Srila Gurudev's quarters, and Yudhisthira Prabhu comes bopping in. He's this beautiful smile he always has on his face, and he paid his obeisances, and he stood up and folded his hands and looked at Gurudev, and Gurudev looked me right in the eye and says, he still thinks Krishna consciousness is fun. So thank you, Yudhisthira Prabhu, for all you did, because this community, you took this community through some hard times also, even though it may not have been the early years. Your contribution is tremendous, and thank you very much for that.
You know how they say Srila Prabhupada would often ask, what does Tamal think? Well, Srila Gurudev would many times ask me, well, what does Yudhisthira Prabhu think? So he so much respected Yudhisthira's managerial abilities, and anyway, it was, he's definitely, like Radhanath said, Prabhu said, that he was temple president, I guess, for how many, what 9 years, 10 years.
Well, we moved to Dallas in late '94, or '84 rather, and then under Naveen I was the VP, and then 10 years from 1990 to 2000, although I was TP, Native American. So anyway, you all were in the early '80s. So many stories. I came on to listen, but thank you all very much, the Tennessee team.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us, Yudhisthira Prabhu. I did receive a question here from Hemangi Devi, and she's saying that now, as Dallas community is growing far and wide, not only around the temple, but also in the outskirts, how can we stay together and connected? If any of you would like to reflect on that. Any thoughts on how we can continue to maintain this family mood and staying connected and staying strong as a community, even now as we are expanding. Of course, like in the local community, it's been growing a lot, and of course our community in the whole DFW Metroplex here has grown so much. So any thoughts on that?
Well, I can tell you one thing that I think is important, and it's important enough that Srila Gurudev brought it out to me, is that during this time when he was here with his disciples, I was sitting up in his bedroom one day, and I was actually, he very kindly let me massage his lotus feet. And he just all of a sudden looked at me in this wanton look. And he says, you don't realize how fortunate you are in Krishna consciousness in that you have so many good friends. He said, I have my disciples and I love y'all, says, but I don't have my God brothers here with me. Says, not only have your God brothers, you guys love each other and your friends. And I think one thing that we should concentrate on to, if you want to call it making the movement grow, but making it strong, is we need to become friends again. We need to associate with each other one-on-one on an intimate level. And also, as we all know, have more kirtans. We've got this beautiful farm out here. We should be using it for kirtans, for association, for everything. But the one thing that I feel like is missing is, and I know that some groups do have it, but really get back to being close friends again.
Thank you, Radhanath Prabhu. Rupana Prabhu and or Maturana Prabhu, if you'd like to also address this question or add anything to what Radhanath Prabhu has shared.
Srila Gurudev brought this question up that Radhanath is mentioning one time upstairs in the darshan room about what we can do to come back together, because at that time, the big going out and doing painting sales and candle sales, that had pretty much passed. But it was interesting to know that during that time period, 1980 to about 85 or 86, Dallas was experiencing one of the biggest oil booms that I guess it had had. And every time you would go downtown, there would be 6 or 7 rooftop cranes with a new skyscraper under construction. And then that ended. That ended when the Arabs cut the prices on their petroleum that they were shipping over here. And Dallas lost a lot of its revenue, especially from real estate at that time, because we were just kind of we had only one big industry, it seemed like, in the city, and that was petroleum. But after that time, then banking came in, actually movies. People were coming here to do some movies. There were a lot of different kinds of industries that came in at that time. And even though we had lost one of the biggest sources of our income, somehow or other we continued, and things have just improved since then. But as far as something bringing us together, Radhanath Prabhu, I don't think anything was firmly decided. I mentioned at that time that what we needed is a good enemy. Because if a place comes under attack, just like the country of Ukraine right now, if it comes under attack, then the whole country then is determined to get rid of the attackers. And so I felt that that was one thing. And anyhow, Gurdev's response to my suggestion was, well, we won't pray for that. But we never really came up with another activity that we could really participate in as a community. At least I don't think we did. Of course, the restaurant is one of our biggest preaching programs right now. Our school is still a good focus for bringing people in. And Gurudev said, you make the school good, And people, even they don't want to come, they will come. And even they don't want to stay, they will stay. So the school has proven that to be true. We have more students, I think, now than we've ever had in the past. And that's a real pleasure to see.
Thank you, Rupert. Definitely, like you said, we need to think of or continue to serve together so we can stay together and continue to make this community strong and thriving as it has. Any thoughts on that also, Materna?
No, I mean, I think that, I'm just reflecting in the early days when we would do things together, like breakfast was always together. All the community ate breakfast together. And I think now it's, I don't think those days you can come back to those days, but because we have so many, families and children in the community and so many nice devotees moving to the community. But I think doing more things together, like kirtan, and also just having things like going out to, like Radhanath Prabhu was saying, going out to the farm and having a picnic with inviting all the devotees and, doing just associating with each other in different ways through the programs also, the morning program and everything, but just trying to get each other's association more. That's what's, I think, really important.
Yes.
Nirti Kishore, I would like to express my appreciation also to Rajeshree Devi and to her sister at a distance, that they have been able to put together these sessions. And I know it's taken a lot of work and a lot of bother on their part to try to get people to come together when they're supposed to. And so, Shaibya Devi, thank you so much for your efforts, and Rajeshree also.
Thank you. I also join in your appreciation for them. This is a really important service to capture all these memories and those realizations from our senior devotees. And so I thank them, and I thank all of you, Materna Prabhu, Radhanath Prabhu, and Rupanu Prabhu, for joining and sharing some of your many memories today, and for everyone else who joined as listeners. If there are any last questions or comments by any of you, we still have a few minutes.
Kishore, I just have one question.
Yes.
Any of them can address this. I just want to know, did Gurudev share with you his vision for Dallas community, what he wants Dallas to be, or anything, any such things?
I think that Srila Gurudev recognized that our temple building was not nearly big enough to hold all the people who might come in the future. And we see that happening now. And so we have these Bhakti Vriksha groups in which people are getting together in their homes at, a little distance from our temple. And I think Srila Gurudev really is looking down and appreciating that, the effort that especially some of our newcomers have made to improve the spiritual life of our community. And I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Can I make a humble suggestion in answer to that question? This is Yudhisthira. Very well. I think one of the things that I think there must be people out there with these skills, and I would definitely contribute financially if needed for this, but the restaurant right now serves about 70,000 meals a year. Plus you have the colleges also. So let's say 100,000 meals a year, which means that, let's say individual people, maybe it's 20,000 because a lot of customers come regularly, but we're not gathering a mail list. There's no mailing list. There's no, whether it's email list or whatever. So the funnel that I think Srila Gurudev would appreciate as far as one approach to bringing in more people in a consolidated way would be to come up with workshops and things that could be promoted to the people who are Krishna is sending to take prasadam in the restaurant and experience that environment. So it would require a laptop sign-up station, which is now so common and easy to set up outside the restaurant door, sign up, get a $5 coupon in the email, discount for your next visit to Kalachandji's, and there you go. You know, and then obviously it's just a newsletter that could be going out to that audience, you know, whether it's identifying, anyway, so many things. How Bhakti Yoga is connected to the prominent yoga practices that are available on every street corner these days is just one example. So that's one thing I feel very strongly. Gurudev, in the late 80s, the Turnoff Guru and others may remember, we set up 30 days straight of preaching programs, and he had Chaitanya Chandra, I think, Worma Turnoff, I don't know, did a button that Gurudev put on his kurta or bead bag that said, "Keep me preaching." And this was in the 1980s. Anybody else remember that?
Yeah, I still have my button.
Wow.
Now I got to follow.
Well, he's preaching through us. He's sharing through us. He's teaching through us. And, you know, you're such a good example of that. And the others who were featured on this Zoom that, you know, one can't deny that he is still present, very much so.
Thank you, Dishtir Prabhu.
The district story.
Yes.
So I hope someone comes up with that, because we could have a list right now with 30, 40,000 people on it, and you know, better to start next week than not at all and be talking about it in 10 years from now. So humble suggestion. Not a techie type person. Somebody would have to step forwards, but they can call me or email if they want some financial support for sure.
Thank you, Yudhishthira Prabhu.
One story, Yudhishthira Prabhu, is I remember the first night the restaurant opened up, I was sitting in the booth, and there were two old ladies sitting in a booth next to me, and one of them looked at the other one and said, "This place is so wonderful." She said, "I'll never say anything bad about the Hare Krishnas again." And so when I told that to Srila Gurudev, he was so happy to hear that, because you know, that was his idea, his you know, vision to have that restaurant like that. You know, again, I think that we should. There's so many pastimes with Srila Gurudev that we have to get recorded also. If you don't mind, I'll end with one that's kind of a funny story. Is that okay, Madhuni Kishori?
Please.
Okay. So Srila Gurudev loved his quarters here so much. This was kind of like his headquarters. And especially Pasupati Prabhu fixed up his bedroom. One night, when Srila Gurudev first came into his bedroom, he had a new mattress and everything. And so he laid down on the mattress and he was asking Jivananda and I, how does it look? Am I pushing in on it? He said, "No, it looks great, Srila Gurudev." He said, "How does it feel?" And he said, "Yeah, it feels good." He said, "But you know, I think the bed is pointing the wrong way." He said, if I could maybe see how it felt over on the other side of the room. And Jivananda said, "Well, that's no problem, Srila Gurudev. We can, Turnoff and I can pick the bed up and we'll move it over to the other side of the room." And he said, "With me in it?" And Jivananda said, "Yeah, you just lay down in the bed." So we both, he got one end, I got the other end. We moved the bed all the way up to the other side of the room. And Srila Gurudev said, "Wow." He said, "That's just like flying." He said, "Now move me back over to the other side again." So he moved me back over to the other side. And I think we did that 2 or 3 times. It was like, he said it was like flying, you know. So I just wanted to, that will open up to so many pastimes, but just wanted to end with that little story.
That's back when you were younger and stronger.
That's exactly right.
Well, you know, one thing that Srila Gurudev really to show how much he appreciated the restaurant. I do not recall his coming into the temple room that often during the construction. He would come periodically, but when the restaurant was under construction, he made regular, at least daily, if not more daily visits. And once the restaurant was established, he used to go in the kitchen at night and he would help prepare the plates, because at the time it was talked about last, we had entree and it was done not, it was a regular restaurant, and you would order and it would be brought out to you. Yeah. And Shirley Gerde was very particular about how each plate went out. And it was like a beehive in there. And one story that Shirley Gerde heard him tell on several occasions that they was this woman, we used to have the window there where you're looking out into the hall, where you could look into the kitchen. This gentleman walked by and Shirley Gerde saw him standing there at the window looking in. And so he went over and says something to him. And he said to Shirley Gurde, he goes, I find this amazing. And Shirley Gurde says, amazing? And he goes, yes. He says, you mean the way that we're preparing the plates, this, that, and the other? He goes, no, I'm amazed at how many people are in here and everybody gets along. And Shirley Gurde thought that was absolutely hilarious, that this man could understand this many people working in proximity and enjoying being with each other.
Can I, this is Yudhishthir again, can I just recognize, just the humility, dedication, and loyalty from Rupanuga Prabhu, Radhanath Prabhu, and Purnath Prabhu when I first came to Dallas, with Brandon at that time, and they were just steady, sweet, humble, loyal, dedicated, and it was grounding for someone like me at that time. I was almost 30 years old. I think I just turned 30 when we first moved to Dallas, and I just wanted to thank each of them. You can't help but know that, Gurdev didn't want me, regardless of being his quote-unquote permanent secretary, whatever he called it. He also said I was the most incompetent, competent, appearing person he ever met. So looks can be deceiving. And just remember how, Materna Prabhu every single night came up there. He didn't want me around because I was representing management and activity, and Rupanuga Prabhu in the morning, cleaning the bathroom with humility, consistency, loyalty, just everything. It was a very personal connection. And I have no doubt that those two, and Radhanath Prabhu, when I first moved to Dallas, you were the temple president, and then you passed it on to, I believe, Mahabhuti Prabhu, then Naveen, then myself. Just so thankful for the three of you for everything that you've done, and your friendship over the years. I'm sorry for all my shortcomings.
How long were you temple president, Yudhishthir Prabhu?
How what?
How long were you the temple president?
Well, 10 years in this world, yeah.
I think you were the longest lasting temple president in Dallas up until that point.
Yes, yeah. And I spent 2 years begging to be replaced, starting at the tail end. But Nityananda was it was the person. So it's all very, very good.
Who came right after you? Was that Naveen Krishna Prabhu?
No, Naveen was before me.
Oh.
And Nityananda Prabhu was after.
I see.
In the year 2000, Gurudev wanted to wait till January 1st, 2000, and I started in, I don't know, January 1st or thereabouts, 1990. And Drista, by the way, Drista, let me just say that Drista, by the way, Gurudev set him up as the first vice president for me because he felt that Drista could buffer me from some of the complexities of the various personalities. He saw that, while I might have some strength in detail and management, personal relationships can sometimes be harder for, people like me at that time. And Drista really was wonderful. Then they left 1993, I think. They moved to North Carolina, something like that. And then Mitzvah and Radharani knows where the help, I knew who to call.
Well, I thank you, Yudhisthira, for lasting as long as you did. That was one of the most impossible jobs, I think, in ISKCON, is trying to keep a community together.
Well,
All right. Thank you all very much for joining today. We're going to end here with offering our obeisances to all of you. Thank you for joining us for the speakers and those who came to listen. Vancha kalpa turubhyascha kripasina vyaivacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. And stay tuned because I'm sure Shagya Devi and Narjeshri Devi will come up with many more programs. I think there's part 2 of the restaurant coming up, Shagya.
Yeah, next week, same time, Saturday at 8:30. We will have the restaurant and the construction of temple and the restaurant.
All right. Thank you so much.
Who will be speaking?
Chaitanya Chandra Prabhu will be speaking. I'm trying Mother Krishna Sakti. Yashomati Prabhu, Yashomati Nandan Prabhu will be speaking. Gopal Prabhu, and I'm trying to get Pasupati Prabhu to speak. So let's see.
Thank you very much, Shagya Devi.
Hare
And
Krishna.
Nritya Kishori, thank you for coming in and being the MC, taking Nityananda Prabhu's place very nicely.
Thank you. Just today. Hopefully he'll be back with us next week and going onwards. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.
great.
Hare Krishna.
Haribo, thanks for everybody.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.